Welcome, everybody. It is May 7, 2024. This is a special work session on a Tuesday night to focus on budget issues. We will try to move as expeditiously as possible because we on City Council don't get overtime like the city administrator for being here. That was in the budget.
I don't know what kind of misinformation you've been reading, but that doesn't.
Didn't you see that? All right, well, before we jump to item 1, and the fire department will be the first item up, public comment on anything. Mr. Nelson.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. I brought paper for everybody tonight because I felt like, you're just, you're special, but maybe not quite that special. So as that's getting passed out, and all that's going to do is just give you the actual documents that I was talking about last night. One of the things, and Andy and I, we've had a conversation in the back while this was starting up, the TIF board down there, they claim, well, you guys budget them money, but then they go enter into these contracts, for instance, with collaborative design. Well, is it a private contract? Or is the city ultimately responsible for any clauses or any overages? Or, at the end of the day, who pays this bill? It's the taxpayer, and ultimately it's our money that's being appropriated down there. And so you guys allow an advisory board to have free rein to enter into contracts that you guys never see that you're ultimately responsible for. But this first page is the city planning website. I went there this morning looking, I'd find an agenda. They haven't posted an agenda since August of last year. They have the meeting at 7 o'clock and it starts at 6. So that doesn't work. This next page is actually the page from their website stating that there's a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. And then you're going to see this page, you got the last agenda posted was April 2nd. The next page is another place they could have posted the agenda, but it's April 2nd again. There's pending applications. We're going to probably have some tonight, but there's none pending that we can look at. The last page is the budget, their budget. In 24, they budgeted $5,000 for a website. And the only activity on that website last month was posting that second page noticing the meeting. That's all they've done, and we're costing us $5,000 a year. With no agenda, no documents, I would argue that the meeting that they're about to have here in 25 minutes is actually illegal. I don't even think they can conduct a meeting, conduct business, do anything. They're violating the statutory and constitutional right to know. I mean, that has been a steadfast, fundamental right we've had. That's why I'm standing here right now, is the public has a right to be part of the process. And we're not going to have any process. It was evident last night. There was comment made that said, geez, we're looking at the budget for the first time, and now all of a sudden you guys are going to try to figure out a budget and ask quality questions? How would you even know where to start? You're just going through a PowerPoint, and that's what's going to happen if they have a meeting tonight. You're going to have a PowerPoint, and you're going to sit there and have to try to come up with an answer or something or a question, and you're ineffective. So with that being said, I'm going to the TIF meeting. I might come back with a report. We'll see how we do.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And Chris, I do think you said last night you'd asked city attorney's office look into it, because my understanding is you do have to have an agenda. That's a bare minimum. It doesn't have to have a tremendous amount of detail, I suppose, but you got to have an agenda that says generally what you're going to be talking about.
And I put a call into Sabura this afternoon and left a message. I'm sure I'll get a call back tomorrow so we can make sure they're in, just a reminder what the rules are and make sure they're in compliance with the interlocal, or the MOU we have that they work under. They work under an MOU. They're an independent entity that works under an MOU with the city, making recommendations to you relative to TIF expenditures.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment on any item on or off our agenda? No one is here with us, so we'll close the initial public comment period. Move into item 1 with 3 subparts. Fire department first, then police department, and facilities. Fire department in your book starts at page 75. So, Chris, I'll just turn it over to Pepper unless you had anything in the way of introductions. Chris, you don't have anything in the way of introductions before I turn it over to Chief Valdez, do you?
Nope. Oh, it looks like Kevin's got
Oh,
some.
Kevin is going to? Okay, then we'll turn it. And
Can I sign in on mine?
And I'll just remind anybody who might be watching, council members Owen and Shaw are with us online. And so, council members Owen and Shaw, hopefully you can hear us. We can't see you because we've got now we can see you. Just use your little yellow hand when you want to say something. As we go around with questions, I'll try to recognize you in your normal place as though you were sitting here with us. But if you do need to get our attention and we don't see you, please feel free to just say something and interject. And now we've got a PowerPoint. Almost.
This is like the fire department. The other one. Well, we can pull it off the staff memo. The PDF, that'll work. Right? I'll see it all the time.
How's everyone doing tonight?
Well, we'll just have to use the PDF for now. Sorry, we won't be here.
It's okay.
I'm gonna share the screen for.
Yeah, no curtains, no.
Okay, very good. We can see the PowerPoint, the PDF version of it, and hopefully council members Owen and Shaw can as well. Should be able to. Excellent, thank you.
I'll scroll, you just.
Chief Valdez, it's all yours.
All righty, thank you. So, Mayor, Council, good evening. So fiscal year 24 provided us with a good visibility into where this department needs to go in order to maintain this good level of service our citizens have come to expect. The focus in 2024, once again, was implementation of new programs, recruit training, and facilities maintenance. And FY24 also triggered everything from service delivery model change to finding more efficiencies. Next one, please. Thank you. So this slide gives a breakdown of personnel with one additional FTE. And that FTE lies within prevention or investigations, which would be line 2. Now, I don't know if you remember during the public safety mill levy, that FTE was the FPE, sorry for all the acronyms, the fire protection engineer. And that fire protection engineer is a unique position within the department as the primary assignment for them is plans reviews for fire suppression systems within the community. Right now, for the last 10 to 12 years, we've had a partnership with a company out of Chicago that we outsource these plans reviews to. We thought it was a good idea to keep that money in local, right here in our community. And along with that, it's a quicker turnover for our developers. And if any issues should arise, they're right there on site to address those issues. So that's where the FPE comes in. What's also unique about that position is that through the fee structure can be 100% funded. So therefore not raising the overall budget. What is not reflected in this particular slide is the issue of overtime. We've been creeping year over year in overtime, and the only way we can cut that back, because we run such a lean system right now, any sick calls that we have, training requires backfill, and then attrition. Right now we're at 11 in the hole and soon to be 12 before the end of this calendar year. And so I would propose that we add 7 firefighters to help us cut back the overtime. Now, also in that proposal is, I would ask that it takes $103,000 total wage package for a firefighter, one single firefighter per year. What I propose is that we take $412,000 out of our overtime budget, slide it into wages to cover 4. Then the additional 3 would have to come from additional funding. It's not in the overall proposed budget because I wanted to bring it forward to the Budget and Finance Committee first and have discussion on that.
If you guys want to ask questions while we go, Councilor Aspenlander?
Yes.
Chief, just to be clear, that 7 does not include the 1 FTE that's the fire protection engineer.
That is correct. Yes.
That one that's fee-based, and then the 7 that you're talking about now is above and beyond.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So I would ask that we would consider that.
Councilor Boyette?
Thank you. If you're saying you're down 11 right now for whatever reason, how can you hire 5 more or 10 more or 20 more if you can't hire the 11 that you have?
So we can hire, so recruiting is not an issue for us. The issue is when we train these individuals. So it takes a cadre or a training program to onboard. That's the issue right now. And so we fully intend to onboard these 11 to 12 authorized positions in August. That's the earliest we can get to them. Oh, you bet.
Okay, Councilor Kennedy, I can see this might be a long presentation. Go ahead.
I will go ahead and after we're done and with amendments, I can go ahead and amend to go with the 4 out of the overtime budget. We're going to have to look for where the money would have to come from for the 3.
Okay.
But I think most of the council would look at your overtime budget to reduce it to coming up with the 4 positions. But I'll come when it's time to do amendments and do at least the 4.
Yeah, Councilor, I'm going to suggest that let's go get the whole presentation. We'll come back. We'll have questions and before we get into the meat of it. Go ahead.
Sounds good.
Chief.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Total public safety fund expenditures are approximately $27.8 million for 2025, with personal services costs representing about 82%. Expenditures are up about $2 million or 7.8% from last year, and this is mostly due to wages, inflation of equipment, utilities, and insurance. Capital in this fund refers mostly to the deferred building maintenance and equipment. Next slide, please. This slide shows the total of all divisions. This further breaks down the operating budget to include the 911 center and the crisis response unit. Next slide, please. FY25, as mentioned before, saw many changes, upgrades, and achievements. This list is not in chronological order and is certainly not all-inclusive. And a lot of these we'll readdress, I believe, next month when we talk about the annual report. But some of the highlights, remodeling of Fire Station 8, which should be online next week. And then we'll have a soft opening with council members and media and general public invited to that soft opening. Annual training with the National Guard Civil Support Team, the 83rd out of Helena, and they are a huge enhancement to our hazmat response team. Achievement of the ISO rating of a 2, which is a first in Billings history. Certified compressor techs for our SCBA team, and why that's important is we used to outsource that, and we'd have a lot of downtime for critical pieces of equipment, and it was expensive because the individual that was certified to work on our compressors came from Denver. So we sent our folks to get certified in this, and now the downtime has been cut down dramatically and is much cheaper. Officer development and engineer development programs, why that's important is because those also affect our overtime. And so having those programs up and running does have the potential to reduce our OT. And then implemented a new public education program called the Safety Squad, which started last week with SD2 and has already become wildly successful. Next slide, please. Continuing the highlights, we were able to implement the second squad for the MRT program just after the start of this fiscal year. That was July 10, with great success. Crisis Response Unit program is fully implemented. That started October 3rd. We do have a new medical director on board, a new core radio system will, in conjunction with a radio changeover, will take place next Tuesday. Actually. Proximity dispatching, you've heard me talk about that quite a bit. We finally got that online last month. Again, with great success, we've been tweaking and fine-tuning that. New dispatch protocol systems for both police and fire. So we switched to emergency medical dispatching about a year and a half ago, and has proven very successful for us. We have now switched over to EFD, emergency fire dispatching, and now EPD, police dispatching. And what that does is basically AI thinks for us and then sends the appropriate units for fire and police and medical now. New drone program, you had the presentation last month, and then SWAT medics for police and fire, that just started, the onboarding process just started about 2 weeks ago. Next slide, please. Grants, and more grants. As you can see, we've been pretty busy turning over every stone we possibly can with the help of our grant writer, Ted Wilson, and some folks in-house. We've been pretty successful for FY24. We have searched private, local, state, federal. We're searching everywhere. If people are giving out money, we're shaking their pockets for change. The biggest one to note is the AFG, which is the Assistance to Firefighter Grant. And that one, we should know within a week or two if we'll receive that grant, and that will replace all of our heart monitors, cardiac monitors. Those are pretty expensive at about $60,000 a piece. And the current ones that we have are no longer supported. So they no longer have customer service or software support. But we do have a plan B if we do not receive that grant. Next one, please. Goals, FY25 goals, this is fire specific, complete the Station 8 renovation, and in time pursue funding for staffing. Begin the process of building and staffing Station 9, and what I mean by that is architectural and design process. Continue to develop the automatic aid agreement between Lockwood Fire District. Continue monitoring data to determine the proper number and deployment locations for the mobile response teams. Basically what that means is, do we need a third? And if we get a third, where does that go? And then a feasibility of charging for motor vehicle accidents. We've been keeping an eye on this, and over the last 5 years, we've been averaging about 800 motor vehicle accidents per year. We, by law, can charge the insurances for those motor vehicle accidents. And if we can recoup the full amount, which is $500 per, you're looking at about $400,000 a year to offset costs. So we're really looking at that. We've been working with some third-party billing companies that have been guiding us in that. Next one, please. FY25 goals for EMS. This is the rewrite of EMS ordinance. We did discuss that during the council retreat. And we have a near finished product, and we'll be putting it before you here soon. Continue monitoring the data to determine the proper number of the crisis response unit. We know that PD has expressed interest in getting a 24-hour coverage. Right now, we're just 12-hour coverage 7 days a week. Design and implement a mobile integrated health and community paramedicine program. That is a recommendation through CPSM. And then another one, feasibility of charging for lift assists. Group homes, nursing homes, and assisted living homes have policies in place that do not want their people picking up patients that have fallen, and so they call 911. We looked into this as well, and we can charge for that. So we'll bring that forward as well to see if council is amenable to that. Next one, please. FY25 goals for 911. This is implementation of priority proximity dispatching as well as the new dispatching protocols. So we ripped the 911 center down to the studs about 2 years ago, and everything is finally starting to come together. And it's helping us with our dispatching processes and times, which is the second point. Upgrade the station alerting system to reduce the processing times. It's amazing how we still need the critical thinking portion of it, but a lot of AI and algorithm stuff, it's way above me, is really starting to come into play here and help us with our processing and response times. And then also complete the implementation of our new core radio system. That's in conjunction with the protocols and new radios. Next one, please. Mr. Kukulski asked us all to do a 5-year strategic plan, and this is a very, very basic, generalized plan. My staff and I, this is the direction we think we should take. Again, this is generalized. This is not detailed or set in stone. But if you look at FY25, you have the 6 firefighters at the top there, plus the 1 additional for a squad. That would be that 7 that I just asked for. And then the 1 fire protection engineer for FY25. Then you slide over into FY26, an additional 6 firefighters. That would be to start the process to staff Station 8 to get that process underway. And then an additional 6 for a squad if we need to add a 3rd MRT, which I believe we do. And then an FTE for EMS. We have pulled an individual office shift and put them under our Assistant Chief of EMS to help with the administration of crew and the squads. And that is causing us overtime as well. And then if we want to expand the crisis response teams, that would take an additional 2 EMTs. Then below that, you have your auxiliary vehicles for day personnel. The bottom line I'd like to talk about just real quick for you, our fleet, while the MRTs have proven very successful and are picking up about 20% of the call volume and keeping the engines in stations a little bit more, we still need to address our fleet. We have 1 engine left to be replaced, and it's falling apart quickly. It's being held together with baling twine and bubble gum, and we have to constantly rotate our spare vehicles in and out of that fire station. It's proven very expensive to keep that 1 engine running. So a refurbishment, let me back up. We have a new engine on order. The issue is with manufacturers, it's taking about 3 to 3.5 years to get a brand new engine. So we're trying to hold on as best we can with that 1 engine while we wait. In the meantime, there is another option. It's a refurbishment, and this is happening across the nation because of the supply issues. You can take a spare engine that we have 3 reserves right now. They strip it down to the frame. They completely rebuild it, and it adds about 7 to 10 years to a vehicle that's actually at end of life. You can extend that out. It's about half the cost of a new vehicle because a new engine is running between 1 to 1.1 million these days. And like I said, taking 36 to 40 months to manufacture. So refurbishment is an option. It takes about 10 months to complete, and they lease you an engine while your reserve is being completely refurbished. So option. FY27, that would be 6 more firefighters, and that would complete the staffing of Station 8, and then a new engine purchased, like I said, about $1 million. Then another of our reserves should be refurbished at that point. Then you slide into FY '28, and there is 15 firefighters in that, and that is to staff fire station number 9 for the West End. That one I would fully expect to go through a SAFER grant on that, and SAFER stands for Staffing for Adequate Firefighting and Emergency Response. What a SAFER grant does is it will pay 100% wages and benefits for however many firefighters you need for 3 years. So you have 3 years from that point that you receive the grant, you get your folks hired, and then figure out how you're going to fund those when the term ends. Again, an additional FTE for the Prevention Bureau, and then another engine, and then the $8 million comes from, right now, a fire station is running about $800 square foot, and then we're assuming about a 10,000 square foot building, and then another auxiliary vehicle. So that sums up, that's really, really brief and broad of a 5-year strategic plan. Mr. Zeller. In conclusion, we'll continue to explore innovative ways to offset cost. Motor vehicle accidents and lift assists are examples. There's many other ways that we're looking at offsetting our expenses, or cost recovery, I should say. Keep pace with the city's growth and manage response times. And then we'll continue to refine 911 dispatching processes to increase their capabilities. We're almost at a point now where we can transform that center from a call-taking center to a coordination and deployment center, so they would actually help our incident commanders on scene determine what resources they need before they even make that decision. And then start to implement the 5-year strategic plan. Last one, which is questions.
Very good. Who'd like to start us off? Councilmember Boyette, I saw your hand first, and then we'll go to Councilmember Tidswell.
Thank you. So, Chief, I always run my neighbor is my litmus paper for the city of Billings, and I ask him dumb questions all the time. But if I tell him that the fire department has 20% less calls because of the MRU and the crew, he'd say, well, why can't we reduce the fire department by 20%? What do we need more fire department for if 20% of the calls are done by EMTs versus firefighters? Just a normal person would think the relationship, if this goes down, this goes up, this should go down.
That's an excellent question. The answer to that is the calls for service are not decreasing. They're actually increasing. All we're trying to do is deploy equipment or resources for specific types of calls. But the call volume is not going away. It's actually increasing. And so the overall budget of the department will have to continue to meet that and increase, but those calls are not going away. We're just simply trying to find different ways to deploy our resources. That's all. Does that make sense? So you're taking the pie and reallocating things, but it's the same pie.
Okay, but then another solution would be to reallocate where the fire departments are now then.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Fire departments around. Instead of building a new one, just move one.
Well, you still have time and distance is the issue. I can tell you now for the West End, out by the reservoir, we're out of guideline compliance for time. We're out of guideline compliance for road miles. And the standard states that when you are receiving 3 calls or more per day, you should be looking at a fire station. And in that area, we're at 6 calls a day. You bet.
Councilmember Tidswell.
Yeah, Chief, you gave us some numbers on the MVA charges.
What, the numbers?
You gave them to us.
Yes, sir.
What does that look like on the lift assist?
So we haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
We're just starting to dig into that. But again, we're working with a third-party billing service that has done this before. It's not new. It's not unique to Billings, but we're just digging into it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Councilmember Rassflatter? Anything further? Councilmember Kennedy?
I've already made my comment.
Okay, and Chief, the biggest thing I've heard you say so far is request for the 7. And if you can reallocate overtime pay for 4 of them, I believe you said, I doubt anybody's going to have a lot of objection to that. The other 3 become a big issue. Could we just wait on those 3 until you have been able to implement the charging for lifts for motor vehicles? I think motor vehicle alone, you said might raise as much as $400,000, but that would assume you were collecting from everybody,
And
right? Which is
100%.
unrealistic. So-
Correct.
So, but if you only need 3, then and if you got to 75%, that would cover all or most of that cost. So how long until you're going to see that money, and can you live without the 3 until we get to that point next
So
year?
there's quite a few things in play here. The biggest thing is it takes, we factor in, it takes about 7 because it takes about 2 per shift. We're receiving about 2 missing people, if you will, per shift on a daily basis, whether that's attrition, whether that's sick leave, scheduled vacation, training backfill, you name it. The list goes on and on and on for reasons that trigger overtime, staffing the trucks, staffing the MRTs. So it would take about 7 to even move the needle, if you will. And so, but I also caution that if we do this, it'll take some time before you would see the benefit, because it'll take some, like I answered Councilmember Boyette's question, it's going to take some time to onboard everyone. And so it's almost a vicious cycle, if you will. If you said to me, if council said to me, hire 12 today, right now, it's going to take a bunch more overtime to onboard those folks and get them in line. And it takes time to get them in line before you would start to see the benefit, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
You don't want to wait till next year until you, or is it accurate to even say that you might see this additional revenue next year? Is that realistic?
That's realistic, yes. Next year,
Okay.
yes.
And do you think you're always going to have this chronic 11 down situation, or that's probably a blip, right? So, if you're having unusual problems now, hopefully that problem will not go away, but become quite a bit less in the next year.
You know, I never thought I would see it. I'm approaching 3 decades on the job here, and I never, ever thought that I would see us in a position where we are having to actively recruit. It used to be, you'd have one position open up, you'd have 100 people standing in the doorway waiting for a job. Times have changed. I don't know what it is. I don't know what has shifted in the workforce, but we are actively having to recruit now. And instead of a retention mindset where it was 20, 25, 30-year career was nothing, we are now in a recruit mindset. We are constantly having to worry about folks that we bring on board doing 3, 4, 5 year stint and then leaving. It's almost like the military, where they sign their contract for a 4, 5, 6 year stint and they move on, and then the military has to backfill that, right? That's kind of where we are nowadays. I don't know why that is. The jobs are plentiful. Younger folks are able to come in, get 2, 3 years experience off the Billings Fire Department and go back to where they come from, or go to a bigger department or a smaller department. The reasons are all over the map.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to compliment you on your Safe Squad. They came to Burlington School, and the only thing that would have made those kids happier would be a therapy dog. They were so excited, we couldn't keep them quiet. It was a very good experience for the school and for the kids, and I really appreciate that. And I know a lot of people, we're talking about very serious budgetary things here and how to pay for additional FTEs, but having kids know what to do in a fire is just so very important. So I appreciate that. In terms of you, do you think that you'll be able to come back to council with some ideas of where you get the funding for that additional, firefighters that aren't paid for.
Yeah, I would love to roll up my sleeves and work with Andy and city admin. I just wanted to bring it forward to see if it was even amenable
Thank you.
to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Owen, you're seated next here.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I was hoping you could just elaborate a little bit on the crisis response units, specifically as to funding. What are the sort of decision metrics for going to a 24-hour cycle? Where are we with working with the state on Behavioral Health Commission grants as well as Medicaid reimbursement? What's the funding picture look like, and what is the timelines for considering an expansion to round-the-clock service?
I'll be honest with you, Councilmember Owen, as far as the grant funding piece of it, out of my wheelhouse again, as Chief Banfield, I let him run that full bore 100%. On the operational side, because we do shut down after 9 o'clock, I know, and I don't know if Chief St. John could speak to this, but I know that the interest has come from police. There was confusion when we first started. They thought that it was a 24-hour program, and when they called for it, there was no crew unit coming. And so we have heard on several occasions that they would absolutely love to see a 24-hour unit. So I know the need is there through a request by PD. And that is what I would base it on so far.
Okay. Well, I would love to get an update whenever you have time, either, in email or whatever, on kind of where we are on the funding pipeline. And here's specifically why. In the event that we move forward with the county on a short-term holding facility, I want to make sure that we're thinking about how we respond when we have additional capacity to arrest and incarcerate. I don't want us to just pick people up because now we have beds. I still want there to be thoughtful strategy, and I know Billings Police Department does as well, about who is being taken into custody and who is being stabilized, referred. And so I think as we expand our ability to enforce the laws, we need to expand our sophistication to respond to behavioral health issues appropriately. And I think we might see an uptick in need for the crew. And I want to think about it through that lens. So I don't know if we have a chance to come back to Budget Committee and dive into that a little bit more, but I do want to start having that conversation relatively soon.
You bet.
That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, it's really good news to hear you're doing the MVA and looking at charging that. I think it was Councilmember Ewald was on the council at that time. We talked about that. Not only that, but also I'm wondering if you looked also into the charge for house fires, because I know insurance covers that as well. So have you looked into what that would be, or are you looking into that?
We are, and it's a bit of a gray area for us. So my understanding, and this is, again, coming from the third-party billing service, my understanding is that by law, because our primary existence is fire suppression, that we cannot charge or a fee even to an insurance company. It's all the other auxiliary type of calls that we do that we can, because that is not our primary existence. Hazmat, motor vehicle accidents, rescues, we can, lift assist, we can charge for those, but not fire. That's my understanding. Could be wrong, but like I said, we'll keep digging into this.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate you looking at that and looking for ways to generate some revenue as well. A couple other questions. You mentioned the SAFER grant, I believe it was, and you're looking at doing that for firefighters for Station 9. Why not Station 8 and move that up, and that way you can get your I guess it's 12 is what you're looking for now, instead of waiting and when Station 9.
We absolutely could. There's no reason why we
Okay,
couldn't.
so that could be a way to source those firefighters
Yes.
and get them now. Okay. And then I would like to understand more about this overtime issues that you're having, and really root cause of why, if it's just the number of people, or is it something that you and I have talked about? And I can say I don't fully understand this. When Councilmember Ewald was here, he understood this a lot better than I did. But as far as the adjustment of Kelly days, because I understand if the Kelly days or adjustment are done, you can have you can use less firefighters to do some of the same amount of work. And so maybe you can, we as a council can understand or learn a little bit more in Kelly days, how that actually can benefit. Because what I would like to see that is on these your 5-year strategic plan, if those Kelly days were adjusted, really, what number of firefighters would you need? Would they be reduced by 2 or 3 or just only 1? I mean, what impact would that be if the Kelly days were adjusted, not only on that, but also on the overtime? You know, because now you have the firefighters are actually able to work longer hours because they are allowed to work those type of hours.
Sure. So to address the overtime piece, some of the triggers for that, first of all, we run a very lean operation. So, and what I mean by that is when, we have so many personnel per shift. And when an individual has called in sick or any of these numbers that I've mentioned through attrition, because we're shorthanded now by 11, public education, we have to backfill for those people that go to the schools because we can't just shut rigs down to go do that. Staffing of the truck is a critical piece of equipment for our sick leave, vacation, trainings, the ODPs, the EDPs that I had mentioned, and wage increase, all factor into overtime. And so we just don't have a whole lot of wiggle room, and we believe that by adding 2 more per shift, plus the extra, would help us have a little bit more wiggle room to do some of these things without having to shut operations down. Going to answer your question on the
Kelly days.
Kelly days, thank you. The issue there was funding, and the reason for it is, yes, you can attrition firefighters out, but the direction that we're moving to, it doesn't show the reduction in. And what I mean by that is, first of all, Andy and I sat down and did the numbers. If you were to hire 12 for a fire station, or if you were to adjust the schedule to get those people to work longer hours, either way, it was almost, give or take about 200,000. So right now, if we were to do either or, it's about a $2 million increase to the budget. Whichever way you decided to go, whether you wanted to hire the people or whether you wanted to adjust the schedule, it was still going to cost about $2 million to open one fire station.
So the difference was $200,000?
Give or take, yes.
Okay, which is approximately 2 firefighters.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, thank you.
you bet.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Gulick, and then Councilmember Shaw.
Great, thank you, Chief. A lot of things I liked hearing and others have mentioned as well, the getting reimbursement for both motor vehicle crashes. Do the MRTs, can they address a typical crash situation? Or, I mean, I know if you got, jaws of life or something like that they're not going to be able to help with that. But is that who's coming to the typical crash?
No, so at that point, they're just extra hands. They are not, their main focus is medical.
Yeah.
But for a motor vehicle accident, it's going to generate a full engine response.
All in on the fire protection engineer, it's great. Also supportive, as others mentioned, the additional staff and the firefighters out of overtime. I'm wondering in terms of, with these other reimbursements, we could do a budget amendment maybe if you're able to find funds for the other 3 later, so we don't need to commit to that during this budget potentially. Like the refurbishment of the vehicles, that sounded good. Also, I like the officer and engineer development programs. I think just bringing more things in-house, it gives us more resilience. I applaud that. In terms of the short tenure of some of your staff, I'm just curious about exit interviews, what they're determining in terms of why they're leaving, and if that comports with sort of national trends, or is there something unique about how we're doing things here that we might need to change, or I'd be interested to find out if you had some sort of report out on what's causing those changes, those people to depart.
So generally those folks come to my office. We have a conversation on why an individual is leaving. And I've heard everything. The most common one is we're getting we've had a lot of hires from the west side of the state, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And we get a lot of, my wife wants to go back closer to family.
Yeah.
We've gotten that. We've gotten, we're too busy. And we've gotten, I want to go to something bigger, a bigger department. So we're all over the map.
And are those survey or exit interviews tracked? Like, do you have just the reasons? Yeah. Well, so I'd recommend getting them out just so that you can see
Sure.
patterns better, because it's
Sure.
you might remember the last 3 you got, but then the previous ones might. So yeah, I would encourage you to get those tracked. I think lastly, nothing else. Yes, CPSM. I know we're talking about for police. We're talking about doing an update there. I'm just wondering if, with regard to Station 9 and/or short tenure, if we're looking to have CPSM look at fire department at all, or is it just police department now? Maybe it's for Chris, I guess.
So, Councilmember Gulick, this contract is just on the police side. That was deliberate.
Yeah.
In working with the chief in the department relative to how recent we've rolled out the crisis response units in particular. And though the MRTs have been now a full year plus, a little over a year, we thought at least another year's worth of data would be really critical. And if you go back and read that fire report or skim through it, you'll see that the MRTs and the CRUs have a very significant impact, which is what we're experiencing. So we wanted to wait at least another 12 months or close to that before pulling that CAD data and seeing what the impact is. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Chief. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I really like the initiative that you've taken. I wanted to let council know that I just sent out this agenda, but Chief Banfield is going to come to the council's legislative committee tomorrow to talk about CRU MRT funding and any legislative action that might need to happen. So really appreciate you making him available for that, and hopefully we can report back to council on anything that we might need to, advocate for with the legislature in this next session, because I think those are really important programs that we want to see expanded and not shrunk down because of budgeting issues. So Chief, I just have one question for you, and it's just a follow-up on kind of some of the questions other people have asked, but am I understanding correctly that you do or you don't want to move forward this year if we could only do the 4 positions that you could pay for out of overtime? Would you still want us to move forward with that, or do you want us to wait until we can do all 7 at once?
So my worry is if we just did the 4, I don't think we're going to see any benefit from that. And then also it'd be taking almost half of the overtime budget away, which scares me to death. So if we were going to do this, I would honestly like to see 7, because like I said, that gives us 2 per shift, because that's generally what we're down on average every day. So it would be, if we're going to do it, let's do the whole thing this year if we could. If not, then I would rather hold off.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So you'd rather, if we can't find the extra 3 this year, to wait until next year instead of splitting it across 2 years?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, so nothing on this year's budget. We've kind of talked about all that. But I'm looking at your, 5-year plan here. And if I'm adding this up right, this is 46 new FTEs, not including the FPE that's paid for by fees. At $100,000, that's $4.6 million per year. You've got at least 1 new station with all the overhead maintenance that comes with that, plus bringing the new one, Station 8, online, 2 new engines, and all the other costs that come along with all of that. There's obviously no way that's going to happen, in the existing mill structure that we have.
Sure.
We're also talking about this, or at least thinking about this as a long-term plan, in the context of we reached ISO 2 this year. And when the CPSM study was done, we were at ISO 3, which for anybody listening, that's lower than 2. So we increased, did better, good.
Correct.
But we increased, and at a time when we're putting in the MRTs and the CRUs that are much more flexible and mobile than engines are, we're doing better on our fire suppression, capabilities, at least based on the ISO rating. I think there's a lot of education and data that we're going to have to pull together before we can even really throw these, we're going to staff up 8 and 9 into any kind of content, any kind of conversation. I want to, make sure that we're thinking ahead in that way. And when the time is right, we've got those in and we've got all the public support we need for it. But I certainly don't see where we are right now, where that's really going to be, we certainly wouldn't be prepared to have that conversation today.
Sure.
So I think I'm looking forward to when we do update the CPSM and seeing the impacts of what those MRTs and CRUs are. Because I think, the fire department of the future is probably much more mobile than big, stations kind of dictate. That model, I think, is probably not going to serve us well going forward. So I appreciate you thinking what that 5-year plan is. If this is the direction that we head, we got a ton of work to do to figure out why.
Sure.
And to educate the public. So, like I said, it's not on this year's budget, and I do appreciate this kind of thought that's going into this. We got a lot of data and research to do to get there.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, council, before we move on to the police? I do have something, and Councilmember Bernice, it looks like funding is obviously central here, Chief. One of your statistics took my breath away at $800 a square foot, current dollars, I guess, for a new fire station, probably more by the time we actually got around to billing it, call it $1,000 a square foot. One option for funding that is some sort of a fire impact fee. We have them for sewer and water. Other communities have these, is my understanding, that would go on new construction. Although I tend to agree a lot with what Councilmember Rips has said, we're still going to need more stations. As we grow, you can't put out a structure fire with a fire extinguisher in the back of a crisis response unit or an MRT.
Yes.
So you got to have more stations, unless you got helicopters that can magically, send firefighters to the scene. And at least the capital cost could be covered by a fire impact fee. I'm not quite sure how it would work legally if the need is on the west end, say, whether we could create just a district in that area for new development where new development would pay into that kitty, or we could do it for the whole community, even though they're not going to be directly benefited, because I guess they are kind of directly benefited, because if you've got a shortage in one area, it ripples through the whole system. Maybe, I don't know how that would work, but fire impact fees. The best time to have that would have been 20 years ago. We're a little behind but they'll be saying that in 20 years from now if we don't create one today. What about setting that up, and could we start the process of looking into that or doing it, whatever the next step would be?
You want to talk about that?
So, Mayor and Council, yes, I think that we should. I think that this budget should be one of the amendments. We always end up with a few things between budget development and budget adoption. One of the things I think needs very serious consideration is the cost, which we think is probably in that $70,000, $75,000 area based on conversations with Livingston and Belgrade and Bozeman and Kalispell and all the other cities who have fire impact fees. For a fire impact fee, or in Billings we call them system development charges, same difference, but the idea is you can only use an impact fee or a system development charge for capacity expansion. And without a question, I think probably one of the simplest system development fees to understand is a fire system development fee, because if there aren't another 1,100 housing units going in, there's not a need to build another station geographically. So yes, I think we should do that. I would, working with the chief and finance director to see, okay, let's make sure we got the number right, budget it properly, to bring back to you, to ask one of you if you'd consider putting that in as an amendment, and possibly using overtime dollars to cover that cost, which makes the chief nervous. But until we fund that, you cannot create an impact fee just out of saying, I think it's about 300 a home. You have to follow the statute. It's very clear what you have to do, and you have to keep it updated. And so I think it's a very wise investment that people will very much appreciate 5, 7, 15, 20 years from now, when we have millions of dollars in that account to help pay and build stations, instead of only looking to all taxpayers to agree to raise their property taxes to fund these stations. They will still have to fund the personnel. Probably because we're so late to the game, they're going to have to fund portions of Station 9. But there will be a point in time, and I've worked in a community that got there, that every dollar that covered the station and the engine came from the impact fee first up. Then your ongoing maintenance operation all has to be a property tax. So I think that's something we should bring back to you. We would love to get a nod that you like that idea, or don't waste your time, because I don't want to waste the chief's time if that's not something you want us to look into.
Chief, do you have any objection to our nodding?
I do not have any objection to it.
Okay, are there nods? I am seeing nods. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Councilmember Neese.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Mayor, because I've thought we needed that quite a while ago. So the sooner we can get that done, the better. So, Chief, the question I had, sorry, I didn't ask you this before, but on this, the fire protection engineer, and so this is mainly going to be used for, I think you said, fire suppression systems, like
That's the
commercial
primary
inspections and stuff like that for
Correct.
commercial. So right now you're outsourcing that to someone else that in some other area. So I'm wondering if this is, it seems to me like this is more of a specialized industry for the building department to be doing hiring. Why is it under the fire before it was outsourced to another company? Why can't the building department just hire someone specialized in this area and just they have the FTE instead of the fire?
It's fallen under our purview. And so we were the ones to outsource that through FSCI because we didn't have the capabilities in hand. And so it could fall under the building department, but we also have collateral duties for the fire protection engineer as well, with arson investigation, code enforcement as it pertains to fire, so on and so forth. And that's why we decided to keep it under the fire department. The other thing that I forgot to mention on that is there is a potential for other municipalities to use that fire protection engineer as well, so we could get some cost recovery out of that as well. I forgot to mention that.
Okay, so that could bring additional revenue to help cover it.
Correct.
So the actual position itself, because you can't, for fire investigation, you're not going to be charging for that.
No.
So the position itself may not be 100% covered unless you actually outsource them to other communities to help generate more revenue to cover their.
No, we project that it will be fully covered just in this community alone.
Just in the community alone. So they'll be doing their work, plus they'll be doing other stuff, and then it'll all be covered. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Councilmember Kennedy.
Chief, under here you had for facilities to deferred maintenance. Can you defer about $300,000 for a year if we're looking at impact fees? If we are going forward, and go ahead and find those 3 other positions and get the 7 going.
So could you repeat that?
Can you wait a year to take the full amount for deferred maintenance instead of in this year?
I'll have to think about that one, actually. I hadn't thought about that. I've got my facilities guy here that will probably speak to that here when he's up. That's always an option, but we do have some serious infrastructure issues, and even the 300,000 really isn't going to cover the things that we need to get done for this year as well, but it is an option.
You know, it's the difference between getting the 7 personnel.
Yes.
Or waiting a year to get some of the deferred maintenance done.
I would agree, and that's why there was I hadn't brought the fleet to you as well with fleet issues too. So the decision was to move with people as the priority. So you're correct, yeah.
Okay, so there's an option there.
Absolutely.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Bernice?
Yeah, I just want to speak towards that. And again, unless it's changed, but I think the last time we looked at some of the maintenance at the fire stations, it was severely needed. And some of it was very kind of health-related conditions as well. So I would, before we would consider making that change, we should hear from the facilities on that to really hear what is it that can or can't be deferred, because there are some things that need to be done.
We did have a formal report done for all of our facilities that would probably be able to help for some of these decisions, but it was pretty scary when that report came back. So,
Okay, Councilmember Owen, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo, I think what Councilmember Neese said. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, but it was a very deliberate council decision to allocate $300,000 per year for facilities investments. So I think it's helpful to stay focused on that path that we set. And I think we can work creatively to fund those positions otherwise, but the chief is correct in saying that the report was disturbing, and it was a very deliberate council decision to prioritize $300,000 per year in deferred maintenance. I think Councilmember Gulick had quite a bit of input in sort of helping us craft that position. So I would certainly support us continuing to not let the facilities further deteriorate and affect the employees.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, I suggest we move on to the police department. So, Chief, thank you very much, and to you and the rest of your crew.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Chief St. John, welcome.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Apologies to the subcommittee. Some of this will be redundant, but for the whole of the body, I'll repeat some of this. I didn't have any prepared slides on our 2023 or 24 accomplishments. I did provide everybody with an annual report, which talks about everything the department did, top to bottom, inside and out. What I will point out to you, some highlights that I'm very, very proud of, and I think which adds credibility to our strategic objectives going all the way back to the safety levy and what we were going to do with the resources that you and the citizens gave us. For 2023, we saw an overall reduction in violent crime of 3.1%. Aggravated assaults specifically were down 7.2%. Our property crime was down across the board. Burglaries down 22%, theft 10%. Stolen vehicles, 16, and fraud cases, 34. The one thing that I would point out, and kudos to the fire department for the crew, in the short time they've been in service, which is October, our calls for welfare checks, suicide threats, or suicide attempts went down 10% and 13% respectively. That alone speaks to the effectiveness of that program. And I know our officers love it once they figured out that they could dump some calls on the fire department. We don't call it that in the professional world, of course, but certainly that program is working well, and look forward to working with the chief to expand that. We also hired 18 new officers. They came in piecemeal, but when I saw their name in one big block, that's a lot of new officers coming on board to fulfill the obligations of the safety levy. And of course, we had some attrition and retirement. And so that's really some of the highlights. And again, the annual report has much more detailed information, and happy to discuss that with you at a later time if you like. Next up, please, Andy. Try to make these presentations as clear and succinct as possible. So presenting to you the bottom line up front, clockwise from the 12 o'clock position. Obviously, the biggest expense for any public safety department, police is no different, would be personnel. You can see 77% of our requested budget are personal services, and that's where it needs to be. We do not sell a product, we provide a service, and this is where our number one asset is. Moving clockwise would be O&M. You can see second biggest, I think that's 18%. I can't quite, yeah, 18%. A increase there that I'll show you a little bit later is that I think everybody in the city took a hit on our liability insurance, and ours was $500,000 for some reason. So that was a pretty big increase in our O&M, and then we had some other items as well. Small amounts for capital, debt service, and transfers. The debt service we're paying on our evidence building out there, and then we're buying some cars and have the regular transfers as everybody else. All in all, the requested budget's $33,530,000. Not all of that is coming out of public safety. We have some programs which add to that bottom line, which I'll expound on later. Next slide, please. In sum, here's the comparison. This is public safety fund only. No program additions to this. You can see our comparison from FY24 to 25. 1.8 million, 5.9, a lot of that was for personal services, about 4.5% increase. We have contracts, we have steps, we have increases for that. We also put on additional personnel for this budget, which I'll address a little bit later. O&M went up 16.7%. Again, the biggest hit there was that liability increase. We did have some software expenses and some safety things such as vests and the equipment that goes along with that. And then just a reference there on our calls for service.
Hey, Chief, sorry to interrupt, but why is the total budget on that slide different from the previous one? This is 32.5, the other one was like 33.5. Do you or Andy know?
So the third, yeah, if you can hold on one second, I can explain that. So we generate some revenues through some grant monies that adds on to the public safety fund.
Got it.
Okay. And so I think we already did this here, Andy. I think I got ahead of you. What we've done for you here is rather than look at that big number, if you want to know where we are spending our money throughout the department, we've broken it down roughly into our divisions. You can see that in the first column, and then break it out essentially to O&M and personnel services. That's where the big chunk of money's going. So you can see, if you look in the first column, third row, which would be our operations division or patrol, which is where the lion's share of your salaries are, your O&M, and the total across. And so that's how we broke it up. So you can look at the department division by division and see where we have it rather than just one big total. Next slide, please. And Mayor, here is what I would refer you to. Halfway down where you see the public safety fund, that's what Andy and his crew have allotted us. The police programs are the grant monies, the programs that we have actively solicited and added to our overall operating budget to give us that 33 million total.
Thank you.
Questions on that? Next slide, please. Some key changes in the in the budget for what we requested. Certainly working with Andy and his staff. We are in the process of replacing MDTs in the car. We had 40 of them last year, and we wanted to do the balance of them this year. Unfortunately, the budget won't support that, so back that off by half, and then we'll look next year to pick that up. Obviously, cost of all that stuff keeps increasing. On the personnel side of things, we have 4 new FTEs, which goes to year 1 of our 5-year plan. What we have included are 3 police officers and 1 CSO in year 1. And I will address that here in a second. Next page, please. So this would be our 5-year plan. FY25 is already in, so the other balance of the years would be up for discussion. But what we wanted to do was essentially add 3 officers a year for 5 years, CSOs every other year, and then of course we need some support staff. You can see the totals across on the far right. We've added what a vehicle costs and all the stuff that goes in. Down on the bottom, what the equipment costs for everybody. Frankly, putting police officers on duty and in a car is really expensive. And so those are the totals. In my time in the big chair, I have never come out of a subcommittee meeting being told you need to ask for more or not enough. And so we have worked up some numbers for consideration. If you wanted to front load 6 officers in year 1, 6 officers in year 2, all the things like that, we can, extrapolate numbers on what the council prefers on this. My goal was to make this attainable and palatable, with the understanding at this juncture we have no new money, and I would really, really encourage council not to cut another department's budget or part, to help us out, because we are truly intrinsically linked. We all need to succeed together, and if we can avoid that, that would be appreciated. So that's what the 5-year plan going forward is. And again, I have numbers for front loading it at 6, which is obviously gets up there pretty expensive in a hurry. For example, year 1 total, if you were going to go 6 officers and 1 CSO, salary total $609,000, and you got $59,000 in equipment just in year 1. So again, and that of course is in perpetuity. As it stands right now, what we are going to field, we are authorized 168 officers. This does not count the 3 that are in this year's budget. If approved, that'll be 171. I will tell you right now, we just hired 2 today. We stand at 166 out of 168. We are not having a problem recruiting people. We are not having a problem hiring. That doesn't equate right now to seats in butts in seats, because we have them in various stages of training. But on paper, we are only 2 down from our authorized strength. Again, hired 2 today, and we've got another hiring process within a week or 2. So we'll keep moving for that. I have 3 potential retirements before the end of the year, all over 25 years. So they don't have people leaving early to speak of. Like Chief Valdez, when people leave, it's generally she wants to go home. But the ones that moved here, or the ones we just hired, she wanted to come home. And they were officers in other places. And so we get the inverse, but we have the same type of situation. So the officer, our sworn is in pretty good shape right now. I'm very, very happy with that. I'm happy with the recruiting effort. I arrogantly say that we are an employer of choice. The city of Billings is a great place to work, a great place to live, fair salaries and benefits. You're not going to be a millionaire or Fortune 500 unless you marry into it, and we have a little bit of that. But for the most part, we get some great candidates. We stand at 41 support personnel. That right now, I would say, is our weak link. We have some shortages there, and everybody focuses on the law enforcement side of things, but if we cannot get reports entered, if we can't generate statistics, if we can't get documents to the court, we're dead in the water. And so that needs some attention, and in the proposed 5-year, I asked for a couple, 3 over that time period. And so hopefully we can get that up. And then animal control also belongs to the police department. We stand at 7 employees for what is a very, very difficult job. I think all of you have probably fielded animal calls of some sort. You have some very motivated and dedicated and passionate people about their animals, and we've got a total of 5 ACOs, and the other 2 are office staff. So we'd like to grow that as well. And if I could address a couple things that jumped out at me at the subcommittee meeting. So 3 things really popped out was, number 1, we need to be thinking more officers, which, okay, we can add whatever you like. However, we're doing pretty well for numbers. Number 2 was the concern for the lack of training budget or shortness thereof. The general training budget for the police department is $158,000, and that's really everything that's encompassed. We also bring in another $53,000 in grant-funded training for a total of $211,000 in overall training for the police department. We are expecting, we have a grant outstanding right now for another $40,000. So we have money coming in. Obviously, you can always use more money and put it to good use. We host an awful lot of training. We bring outside instructors in. It's not our intention to generate revenue. What we want to do is be able to get slots for free and cover our costs. And so for last year, just specifically, we were able to net about $4,500, $5,000 hosting instructors, things like that. Again, I'm not in the business to be making a bunch of money off of that, but we're getting free training, we're getting free slots, and we're covering our costs. And so that's where we're at with the training. The second question, and it was very similar that you posed to Chief Valdez on the, taking the overtime money and rolling it into officers. I don't have officers I need to hire right now. The overtime money is needed for where it's at. We need to do a better job, most definitely managing that. And we'll tighten our belts, and Andy helped us out by rolling us back to FY24 numbers anyway. So we need to do a bit better job, but those overtime that we have used, continuation of service, call outs, some of the things that you see with contractual type deal. But another thing that really doesn't reflect when you look at the bottom line is that we had about $486,000 of reimbursed overtime. Our officer would go work somewhere at an overtime rate. We pay them off of our payroll. We submit the bill, and we get the money back. And so of our overtime costs, we do get a fair amount back. Certainly, I know overtime is a sensitive issue, and I'll be the first to admit we got to do a better job tightening that up. But for the most part, it is needed. It is used appropriately. And I don't, if I'm going to be fully staffed, I don't need to use overtime money to buy stuff. And I totally agree that we shouldn't be using overtime money to minimum staff or bring extra people in. And we're just not having to do that right now. There was a time, but we're in pretty good shape right now. Mayor, any questions?
I'm sure there will be. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the detail. Who'd like to start? Maybe there are no questions. Councilor
All right, thank
Boyette.
you.
So one of the hard questions is, what, if anything, keeps you up at night about your department? What is your burning issue that if you had a magic wand, you could fix, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, the magic wand question, I think you've asked me that one before. I think, a myriad of things is, I think public trust is a big thing, making sure that we are doing things the right way, and at the right time for the right reason, and we're maintaining that public trust, and which in turn manifests itself into council has confidence and trust in the police department and what we're doing. So I'm always worried because you can go from the penthouse to the outhouse very quickly with one bad whatever it is. And so we need to continue to work on that. I'm always mindful of the big issues. We've identified ad nauseum our violent crime, the issues downtown, our traffic, and then supporting our partners with the mental health. As I plan on what it is we need to look at as we go forward, I would say that we did a very, very good job of taking care of the issues at hand. Okay, we arrested a ton of people, we solved crimes, we've addressed things, we've been upfront, been transparent, all of that stuff, we've done very good. But what I hear over and over, and I hear it from you as well, is that there is a fear of crime. And it's a real thing with certain people. And it's a real thing that the police department needs to be concerned with. And so strategies to deal with the fear of crime, they really run parallel to our traditional policing model, which is respond, solve the crime, get there in a timely manner, all that good stuff. But on the parallel side, it is engagement with the community, visibility, connect, person-to-person contact. When you start looking at it, that's what makes citizens feel secure. Other things that play into that, most definitely. We talk about reducing crime rates. Sometimes that makes people feel better. Especially the people that were directly victimized. Visibility, street lighting comes to the top. It really reduces fear when you can see. Citizen contact. Public confidence in our abilities, and reducing disorder. Those are the big things that help reduce fear of crime. And so that's where we really want to go from, what are you doing about these things? Because we're doing that and doing it pretty well. And then transition over to let's help our citizens get over the perception of safety and fear, and we do that by engagement. Not so much saturation with personnel. You can't have an officer on every corner. And the other thing is that just because people don't see police officers doesn't mean they're not there. We're around, we're doing stuff with the resources that you give us. And so that is one thing that I really want to focus on. We work hard to send that message that Billings is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your family. It's a great place to move your business to. And here's what the police department's doing to tamp down some of those concerns. And it is a real thing. And again, its perception is different for everybody. But that's where I transition to now is how do I get our citizens to stop telling the council members, I'm scared, I don't want to go downtown. That's kind of a pie in the sky type thing because I can't make you not be scared, but there's things that we can do to help alleviate that. And I think on the front end, solving crimes, responding appropriately, doing all the stuff that we're doing right now, we've checked those boxes. Let's move over here and increase and improve our engagement with the community. That's a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, very good. Thank you. Go this way, Councilor Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I love that message. Thank you. I appreciate that. Wanted to ask about head count. It seems like every time you're in front of us, we're always down, 3, 5, 8, something like that, right? But we've got some in the hopper and they're coming online. It seems like on random chance, some of the times you should be like, you know what, we're up 2 right now, but it's okay. We're expecting turnover. We got about 5% turnover or whatever per year. We plan for this. Why does that not ever happen? Are you not being told to hire as aggressively as you can to make sure that we're always, as close to that fully authorized number as we can be?
I have not been told that. Matter of fact, on one occasion, the boss had to tell me to stop because we were overrunning our budget only once. Right. Yeah, only once. So no, this is where we're at right now. I have 5 that are coming up for hire in a couple weeks, which will put us over our authorized strength. And we will keep hiring in anticipation of retirement and attrition. We are in the process of applying for COPS grants, which of course are police officers dedicated to community policing projects. At some point in time, the city has to pick up the salaries. But we know that, we're never going to be full all the time and we can absorb that. There was a time when I didn't want to, get where I shouldn't have been. But Chris has told me to keep going or keep hiring until he says stop, and he's only said stop once. And so we are doing that.
All right. Councilmember Rupp, just one thing from my history there. It takes 46 weeks if you hire from the start of the application till the time they're in a car by themselves. Some of that's the process. I mean, until you get them in a car by yourself, it's a 46-week period if they have to go to the academy. So some of it's time frame. It's not like a solid waste truck driver or something, whereas in a few weeks you can have them up and running from application time to driving a truck.
I appreciate that. I just think on random chance, every other time or sometimes when you're in front of us, we should be hearing, I'm just a couple over right now, but it's okay. No.
I can certainly tell you that regardless, if you like. So.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw, we'll go back to the other end of the table.
Thank you. Chief, I really appreciated your comment. I wrote it down about encouraging us not to cut other departments' budgets because of how intrinsically linked you are with the work everybody else does. And I think by now we've worked together long enough that I'm, of course, a huge supporter of public safety. I really like the 5-year plan that allows us to kind of add those resources sort of incrementally, but steadily. I think I've wanted to see that for a long time, and so it's really nice to see that as looking out into the future. I have 2 questions for you. First is, where kind of are you in terms of the funding and the staffing for additional kind of data analysis and that sort of role? I think last year I remember talking to the person who does all the crime statistics about the statistics on non-fatal shootings that had happened, and it just was not easy data for her to access. It was going to take quite a while. So I'm kind of curious about, do you need additional resources in that area? Because I think that is a really important area for our community. And then I have one more question.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. We have a cadre of interns that are pulling those stats for us right now. We can provide a much more succinct look at the firearms incidents than we did before. We are also, I'm anticipating a couple $100,000 from Rocky Mountain HIDA in contingency funds to work on firearms identification programs at the ATF. So we have adequate funding, I think, coming in. We're leaning pretty heavily on interns and volunteers. I have the one crime analyst who is pretty busy doing stuff. And again, it's all what it is you want. I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort to mine the data and get it to where you want it. And again, I would just ask, if you're going to ask for something, happy to give it to you, but do something with it, please. Because a lot of people, they ask for something, look at it and go, that's nice. And so we've wasted some time on that.
Sure, and that's the last thing I would want is wasted time, but I was just kind of curious about the overall picture there. And then my second question is, a lot of communities have a position that's like a community violence prevention coordinator or somebody who does work kind of in that sphere as a specialist. And so my question for you is, would you envision a position like that if it was added at some point in the future fitting under the police department? Or would you envision that position as being more in like admin, or I'm just kind of curious for future planning?
Council member, I think that, certainly the police department's a good place to start, but it's more of a, community relations, position. So maybe something out of admin with that. Right now, I think, Substance Abuse Connect is probably the closest organization that is looking at things like that. And they've got an organization obviously that's up and running. But it certainly would fall under the prevention standpoint. It might even be better under public health.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted your perspective on that as I'm thinking about your 5-year plan, and I agree with you on Substance Abuse Connect and all of that, but thank you. Appreciate it. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Gulick, anything?
Just real quick, your comments on perception of violent crime. I mean, obviously, we did have a really bad 10 days last year, but the rhetoric I hear about downtown just does not comport at all with my experience of being downtown and being there almost every day. It is good for us to actually recognize that the perception is something we focus on, and maybe take different strategies than actually dealing with crime, right? That is something for us to focus on, and part of that is again things that are outside of the police realm, activating spaces, SEPTED ideas, but just having a more active, vibrant downtown helps with that as well. So anyhow, I appreciate your comments. I don't think I have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I appreciate the comments you made earlier, and I think you're right about the fear of crime. I think the community, whether it's real or not, there's a perceived fear, and that's what we have to address, is that the community has that fear and has the understanding. They read it in the news reports every day, whether it's here or there, somewhere they're believing it's here, and I think we have a job to make sure we're staffed up correctly. A couple of comments you made, which I was a little concerned or questioned, because it wasn't just a few weeks ago and you said you need 21 officers, and yet now I hear you say you're adequately staffed, and then you're looking at adding, a 3 per year, small increment, which, by the way, I agree. I think that's a better way to handle things incrementally and over time, always consistently increasing, because the community is always growing. And so until the community starts shrinking, which we hope we don't do, then we would maybe shrink. But so I do like the 5-year plan, but it maybe not be aggressive enough, because I think you said just because we're not seeing doesn't mean that we're not there. Well, perception-wise, our community is seeing it's not there, the police is not there, and they're feeling that it's not there. And I think we do need more officers on the street. And I think the community does expect that when we invest a lot of money into public safety, and they agree and they've voted in a public safety mill levy, increasing their taxes. They want to see some results, and we've got some good results on paper. But unfortunately, I think it has mentioned maybe we're not publicizing that enough in the right avenues and things like that. So there may be some work that we need to do in that. But I guess I'm not having so much questions as more comments about this, because, again, I like this, but I don't think it's aggressive enough. I think we do need more officers on the streets. I did have a question here. We talked about this, I think, last year, and I'll probably bring it up every year. And as we talk about the growth of the city, and it's getting bigger and bigger, the Belt Loop's coming on, have you considered, or is there a time that you think the city needs to start moving to precincts?
Council member, absolutely. And I had that lined out when I first was promoted. 3 precincts or districts, if you will, whatever you want to call them. CPSM didn't recommend that at all. So they were standing on the basically centrally located operation that we are. We are situated very well for that. If somebody says ready, go, we have a substation out at Fire Station 7. Or actually, they have a substation at Police Station 3 out there. So. And so, we can move a contingent out there to the west end. Obviously, we're set up downtown or at PD1. And then if fire builds another facility out in the Heights somewhere, it is common practice to co-locate public safety that we would ask, again, can you carve a spot out for the PD? And essentially, then you would have 3 separate standalone precincts, whatever you want to call them. Understand now that you're going to need additional vehicles, additional people to staff all of those, and then logistically, how are we going to handle 911 call? How are we going to handle radio dispatch? Is everybody on their own channel? Do we have one for 3? So there's some logistical things there, but we are well set up to split into precincts, districts, whatever it is you want to call it, with facilities right now.
Okay, so I'm going to bring this back to the conversation we had about fire and having some type of system development fee for building fire stations, providing engines for their thing. If you think that the city could or should move to precincts sometime, shouldn't we also be looking at what's the cost going to be to build those precincts, to provide the equipment, not just in vehicles, but all the other equipment that goes with those police officers? Should that also be a conversation that you should be bringing to us to say, well, listen, we need some system development fees for fire or for police as well as fire? Is that something that you think you can bring to us to let us know, or will this come out of Chris, maybe you can answer this, will this come out of this study we're doing now or the cost services study?
Well, I think the cost services can touch on part of that. And I think CPSM, if directed to look at that in scope, could probably make a recommendation one way or the other. And I know Mr. Rifflin and one of my reps are talking about that. Again, they didn't touch on any precinct type activity in their original. It was just the service as we have it now. And again, are we that big yet? And what's the benefit? The benefit out west is that I don't have to have citizens drive all the way into the police department to file a report. We can meet an officer out there off of Grand Avenue. A little bit closer to the Heights, but we're getting out there, so same type of theory. I don't need officers to come all the way in to the BOC to go to the bathroom. They can go and, up and stay out there. Those are some of the things that we look at.
I think the whole idea of collecting those system development fees for those areas that are so far out is to actually get the funds in now. So when we do grow that big, then we can build the facility. If
Certainly.
we wait to start doing that, then it's going to be too late.
Certainly. I understand that. Again, we're precluded from generating our own revenue, and that obviously has to come out of, here I can't charge people for the stuff that we do a little bit. We got some money for alarms, despite the fact the fire department keeps fining us for false alarms. But it's certainly viable. And again, I think at some point in time, the city is going to be of a size that it makes sense to have the precincts.
Okay. And then one last question I have for you. I asked you this about the last year. The technology it's updating and changing all the time. We're investing in these new MDTs, or not, well, they're new, but they're same old technology, laptops, I understand. Has that technology changed, or have you been looking at the new technology for the smart MDTs where it's just on their phone, it's an easy plug-in? Has that gotten any better from when the last time you looked at it?
Not so much with the MDTs, but our radios have some of that capability. Working with the fire department on their side of things. A lot of the the technology part, what's really killing us is the software licenses that you have to pay every year. Those are the things that, that we have to be mindful now. We're in the process of looking at our, entire records management system. Whether or not, we need to jump to another vendor for, better use, more efficiency, things of that sort. But as far as everything on your telephone type stuff, we're not there.
Okay. And I just want to kind of concur with Councilmember Shaw mentioned about the reports of the data. I'd asked for that report on firearms last year, and after I got it, I felt real bad because it took so much staff time to get this report, and the report information that I wanted, it really wasn't quite what I was looking for, so there wasn't anything to do with that information. So it is important that we really strive to find ways that we can get data quickly and easier, and then able to, if it's not quite what we're looking for, to be able to change that without having to have hours and hours of staff time involved. But I won't ask for a report now because I know it just takes too much staff time, and I'd rather have them doing, police work instead of pulling a report for me.
Thank you very much. Chris, I think you want to comment on the question of whether impact fees could include police expansion.
So we will ask CPSM. I'm doubtful that CPSM, based on the work that they do, would get into an area of fitting the statutory connection to system development charges, but I could be wrong. But I am hearing more and more from managers, my peers across the state, that there are cities, small, medium, and larger, who are putting in place police impact fees. Now, again, it's all relative because it can only be for capital. So there's going to be to scale, but frankly, on the capital side, now a patrol car is costing us $200,000 by the time we buy it and outfit it. So just like you heard about a fire truck, it used to be a ladder truck that was over $1 million. Now an engine is over $1 million. So I think it is worth us looking into what an impact fee look like, or system development charge for any of our services that increased capacity demand from growth is a driver of cost.
So Chris, how is that started? Excuse me, Mayor.
I think it's the best place to start, honestly, is it is in the budget, because you have to comply with the statute, you have to have someone do the independent analysis and make the determination of what those cost anticipations are, so that there's nexus and proportionality, that what you're charging per home or apartment or unit or business is absolutely a legitimate cost causer relative to expansion. So I'd say specifically it's, I guess, asking us, find out an estimated cost to do it, because maybe there's a budget amendment that a council member would want to propose, so that this year's budget, we at least have the financial resources to approach that.
Okay, so this is more of a study that's done, not an individual who you need to hire to do.
That's correct. Every 5 years, you have to update it to comply with the statute.
Okay, and since I bring it up, I'm the only one mentioning that. If others think that's something we should do, we should mention that now.
Okay, we'll go to Councilmember Owen, but on this topic, Councilmember Bioy.
Is there any way that if we're going to do one for the fire department, can you do one for the police department at the same, is it two different animals, or is it a similar item?
There's similar animals. There's a handful of firms in the country that really specialize in this area. I don't have any experience with a police one to tell you from experience, but I would think there'd be a fair amount of similarities between police and fire, just like there are between water and sewer. So, yes.
Okay, Councilmember Owen, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, Chief, I guess I just want to push back a little bit on the idea that the primary issue we need to address is a perception of crime. Because I definitely get calls from people who say I feel afraid in certain places, sometimes with justification, sometimes maybe it's just rumor. But I also get calls from people who say my car was broken into again, my shed was broken into, I'm not safe in my home. People who are observing huge spikes in juvenile crime. So I understand what you're trying to say, that there's a perception issue, but I still think we have a very serious and real crime issue. And the reason I bring it up is because I have two questions for you that are important to me. I worry about a perception internal to BPD that is inaccurate. So I worry, and I want you to respond to this, that there is a belief that in order to show that the public safety mill levy dollars were worth it, we need to tell the public that crime is going down. And I don't mean to suggest for a moment that there's manipulation of numbers. I'm just saying, I want us to live in a world where we're able to decouple, at least a little bit, performance of our frontline officers and crime stats. Because particularly as we know that there are facility constraints throughout the system, adult and juvenile, when those get improved, we should see arrests go up. And so we can't have people believe that arrests going up means crime's going up, because that may not in fact be true. It may just mean the officers are able to do their jobs better. And so I just think we need to break a little bit the belief that crime stats mean that the crime going down means the cops are doing their job, and crime going up means that either they're not doing their job or we're understaffed. Because I just think it's more nuanced than that. And I'd like your comments on that. But I'd also like to understand, Chief, as a second question, how do any of us kind of divvy out when we see, particularly in property crimes, the trend numbers going down? How do we attribute that to actual reduction in crimes being committed versus a reduction in reporting? Because we've heard anecdotally, I just don't call anymore because I know the police are busy and I don't want to bother them with my sort of petty crimes. And I think CSOs do a big portion of that, and that's great. But we have these two issues that I worry we're linking performance and crime stats too tightly, and I worry that we're not actually factoring in the possibility that people may be selecting not to report at higher rates than they historically have. Your thoughts?
Okay. So I'll push back on your pushback, if you will, please. I did not mean to say that our entire focus was going to be on working on the perception issue. We still will be working very hard on all those problematic areas. That's the other side of the formula. We've only really been focusing on one, and now it's my responsibility to focus on two. Second, I don't know any other way other than to provide information and statistics as to what it is the police department's doing to show anything. Otherwise, I mean, the people that don't get victimized, and the people that do. And if we're not generating any statistics, I don't know how to track that, and I don't know how to report that to you. It's other than I don't think that there's I mean, you're definitely right. There is an inverse that if I arrest more people, then crime will go down, and vice versa. But those are things that I think require explanation as we move through the situation. The last one, I truly don't think people are just not calling. People call a lot. 91,000 calls for service across the board. That includes officer-initiated stuff. And so I don't think people are afraid to call. I don't think they hesitate to call. And I just don't think that that's something that's an accurate assessment.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree a little bit, but that's okay. I guess I just want to keep, as we look into plussing up resources in the department, which I fully support, I think we need to do. I don't want us to feel an unnecessary pressure to say, well, more officers means that arrests will go down, because for at least a period of time, arrests should be going up. If and when we expand the jail, if and when we add in short-term holding, and if and when we add in more officers, and when we do better on domestic violence prosecutions, because we can always do better, our numbers will go up for a period of time, not down. And so I think it's important that we all kind of think more nuanced as to how we talk about that, because as we add more resources, we should actually see arrest numbers go up. Don't you agree?
Agree.
Okay, thanks. That's all, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I, too, get constituent calls of people who say, I don't see the police coming up and down my street. And I say, that's probably a good thing, because police cars are going to where they're needed. And your particular street might not be the street that needs a police car. So I do understand that, and I know, Chief, you've told us over many years that your resources are deployed where they're needed. And so not seeing a police car doesn't mean the police aren't doing their job. It also might mean that you're not in an area where there's a very intense need for policing. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm going to have the award for the wacky question from council. You know, sometimes just winning an award is important. It doesn't matter what it's for. New York City has gone to 100% electrical vehicles. And this in an era of very high gas costs, gasoline costs, they've figured that this is actually a good move on their part. And so I was just going to ask, will at some time the city of Billings consider going to either hybrid cars or to electrical cars? Thank you.
I would say that if that were going to be a choice, I would opt for hybrid. I don't think all electric is going to work for us very well, especially in 40 below weather. There has been other police departments that couldn't respond to calls because all their batteries were dead. And so I would hate to have that be the situation. We would certainly have to talk to our staff at the motor pool. You are talking about a massive changeover in equipment and requirements, and whether or not that cost benefit would really pay out. I know other departments have them. Some have gotten rid of the cars, some have not. But right now we got gas.
Thank you.
Chief, I guess sort of a comment you can respond to if you want to, and then a question. It's just great that you're at 166 of 168. I'm assuming, and I've mentioned this before, that we don't, in that group, have any Native officers. We've got about 30% of your calls, I believe, involve Native Americans, even though our population is only 7 or 8%. So I think there's an obvious benefit to having Native officers. Notoriously difficult to find. They don't just walk in the door. So I continue to make a pitch for some sort of affirmative recruitment program in the Native world. That's not really a question, it's just a comment, and you can respond to it if you want to. And then the second, we will need to put some money into a graffiti reward account through code enforcement. That's not directly your deal, and it's only going to be probably less than $10,000, I would guess. My understanding is your department doesn't have a real reward fund. You've got a few, the coffee money you can use for confidential informants here and there. Would you like us to try to build into this budget, call it $25,000, $30,000 pilot program for rewards, and would it be properly administered in your department if that were a good idea, or through the city attorney's office, I guess would be the other possible place, or the administrator's office or something like that?
Yeah, certainly, Mayor.
Kevin Iflin could administer that.
We have Crime Stoppers, which, it does pay out rewards for information. So you have that avenue there. Certainly, it's your prerogative whether you wanted to earmark and carve something out specifically. But if you wanted to make a donation right now, Crime Stoppers is available to you.
And that's a good point. My understanding is it's just tiny amounts of money, and that their budget, or at least when I looked into it several years ago, was less than $5,000. So we would definitely need to give some energy to it if we went that route. But yeah, that's a perfectly good point. And it sounds like that'd be your recommendation, if where we would start is just work with that within that existing system.
Certainly, the framework's there. You wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel. And then again, you can dictate amounts and what the rules are and how you want to do that. And we'd certainly coordinate with code enforcement since they're the primary agency now.
Okay, thank you. Going this way, Councilmember Kennedy. Okay.
Chief, I'm just going to tell you, I'm a little disappointed. And I'll tell you why. I ran for this job because we had 2 murders and a shooting down the street, and we haven't had those. I've been in my house for 32 years. Ward 3 has the highest crime rate. The last time I saw the statistics when I was at the South Park Task Force meeting of all kinds of crimes in Ward 3. People talk about it all the time. We have drug houses in the ward, quite a few. And you and I could probably talk about which ones are out there. We also had, I want to say, probably 4 or 5 murders in Ward 3 in just the last 2 to 3 months. And, you know, we had the one on 15th Street. We've had the juvenile in the alley, all of that. What I'm getting to is I would have gone for 21 officers, new officers. And I know you've told me over and over again, you give them to me, we'll take them. But I do have to say one thing. The disappointment where I'm at is the city and the people in the city have said public safety is the #1 issue that we should address. We're still seeing even though you're telling us crime's coming down, violent crimes have seemed to be up. We still have a 19% domestic violence rate in the town. We still, I don't feel, have enough officers on the street. And, you know, I've funded these programs for 25 years when I was across the street. We saw a lot of that. I'm just a little disappointed because the 5-year plan really doesn't do anything for me, and it probably doesn't do a lot for the people in my ward. What they'd like to do is see more of an aggressive push to have more officers on the street. And so, you know, I'm just a little disappointed this evening. You did a nice speech to us all. But really, when the reality comes, it is the people that are saying they feel scared in their own home. They don't want to come out at night. And that's a reality. And we can do all we want. We can talk about it. But really, the reality is to make sure we have a few more officers on the street. So I'm a little disappointed.
Councilor Aspenleiter. Unless, Chief, I don't want to, you're welcome. No? Okay, Councilor Aspenleiter.
Chief, I had some specific questions. I got a couple of questions, but let's start with the Detective Bureau. I'm looking at the staffing chart here, and you got a lot of people listed here, but detective isn't one of them. So I assume that your detectives are listed under the police officer line. Is that yes. Accurate? Okay.
Yes.
How many detectives do you have actively?
So roughly we have 20 general detectives, and then we have a bunch that are assigned to specialized positions, but the detectives specifically in the area of 20. And this is one of the focal areas that we want to position ourselves for with additional people. The new work model, if you will, was to add additional detectives, get to a point where we could split 10 and 10 to violent crimes and 10 to crimes against the family, which rolls into the Family Justice Center, supports that operation there. That's where we want to position ourselves.
So to play off of that comment, where do you see that in the timeline of implementation? And the second part of that question is, how many more detectives do you need to add if in your 5-year plan with 15 sworn officers being added? What of those are detectives, and how many detectives would you be looking to add out of that 15 in your 5-year plan?
If I recall, council member, we needed 6 or 7 to get to the number where we could split them. So what I would do with the sworn officers is, so let's assuming it happens right now, I'm down 2. So 2 to patrol, 1 to detectives. And then phase it in that way till we get the number that we need.
Okay. That's helpful, and I appreciate that clarity. I was one in the budget committee that told the chief, I mean, I like the 5-year plan. I'd like to see the 5-year plan be the 3-year plan for implementation, and possibly the 2-year plan for implementation. And that is something that I'll be pushing for as we start to look at budget amendments, is how do we compress this 5-year plan into a 2-year plan would be my goal. 3 years at the maximum to increase that added officer count from the 3 sworn officers and 1 CSO to adding 8 to 12 in fiscal 25, and working to find the funding to make that adjustment and make that shift. I'm going to push back on you a little bit as we go through this, and I'm going to encourage you to be open to looking with Andy and with Chris as to if we can get to somewhere between 8 and 12, there's got to be some level of a corresponding overtime reduction, and that if we get there, there's got to be some give in that to fund some of those positions. It won't be a one-to-one fund them all, but there's got to be a little bit of give in that, and so I'll be leaning on you a little bit to be open and aggressive and at least looking at what can we theoretically cut and carve out of that when we add more officers, understanding that your overtime calls and draws are they're call related in large part, but there is a lot of there is a good chunk that is administrative in nature. So I'd ask you to think about that, work with Andy and Chris a little bit about where we could find some on that, and that'll be the push that I start to make. So it wasn't a question, and that was my statement, and that's the direction that I'm going to push. The one thing that I would ask to Chris and Kevin is, as we've talked about, just sitting in my office with my engineering team, and this is almost cutting my own throat a little bit because I work in the development industry. I mean, the one thing that my managers in my office said, and we had an hour-long conversation about it this morning, was, why do we not have an emergency services development fee? Why? It only makes sense because every time we do an annexation, every time, we're talking about the impact it's going to have to fire. We're talking about the impact it's going to have to police, and those guys do the best they can with what they've got, and they never say, no, you can't build more houses on the West End because we can't service it. They find a way, but we aren't building for the future, and I think we've got to start somewhere. As the mayor said, we probably should have started 20 years ago. And this impacts my clients directly that aren't going to be excited about it. But we need to have a per unit and a commercial development impact fee for fire and police. I don't see any way that we can continue to grow this community without it. And determining that is something that I would be incredibly supportive of, figuring out what we need to add to the budget if we need to do a study in fiscal 25, because I think that is imperative. And Chief, I appreciate your budget. You're doing the Lord's work, truly. And I appreciate your austere approach to trying to do the best with the least. But man, I want to be a little bit more aggressive, and I'm going to push to be a little bit more aggressive and to try to give you guys the resources that you can and try to build up your team and allow you to continue to do the good work that you're doing. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Chief, anything before we go to Councilor Titswell?
No, sir.
Councilor Titswell?
Thanks for what you do, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Councilor Boyette, did you start us off? Yes, sir. Okay. So council is 7:35. We've still got to have some facilities time. Take a brief break, 5 minutes, come back. Should we release the chief? And anybody have anything? Okay, Chief, I think you're off duty. Thank you. Stop the overtime clock that you were going to be submitting for. Just kidding.
Operating facilities are tens of millions of dollars, and we give them at least 6 to
At least
12
6.
minutes to get that all figured out.
All right, it's all yours, John Caterino.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. It's an honor and a privilege to be here this evening to present the Facilities Division Fiscal Year 25 budget. So the division mission is to serve the citizens, employees, and visitors of Billings by providing safe, efficient, and comprehensive facility management. Here's our org chart. It's bifurcated by strategic components and then tactical components. So on the tactical side, we have 8 individuals that provide hard and soft services. Those are being maintenance and custodial. And then on the strategic side, which reports up to Kevin, we provide a lot of the technical and strategic initiatives that come down from City Council and administration. Our menu of services, we provide hard and soft at roughly 570,000 square feet and 47 acres, 2 City Hall facilities, BOC, animal shelter, recently taken on hard services for the 8 fire stations and the 911 call center, in addition to all their support sites, and then the airport training center. And then additionally, we've taken on hard services for the retail space at Park One. So like I said, the hard services are repair and maintenance tasks that keeps equipment from failing and structures from degradation. And then on the soft services are the custodial components. We also provide solutions. So those requests that fall outside of your general maintenance and repairs. And then additionally, the strategic component, that's the long-term planning, capital replacement. Slide, please. A snapshot of some of the services that we provide on the operational, things such as custodial, emergency service, triage, and then repairs and maintenance. And on the strategic side, we've got capital improvements, project management, and then contract administration. So some of our highlights from fiscal year 24, we're continuing the interior build out of new City Hall. Completed interior remodel Fire Station 8, as Chief said, opening up next week, the soft opening. Excited about that. We're continuing the process to dispose of real property. This location, Park One Retail, and then the 2 surface lots on 27th. We completed Community Center re-roof and re-side. That was a hail repair project. In the process of master planning the 20-acre parcel south of the BOC for future expansion. Replaced a 5-ton rooftop unit at Fire Station 1. Additionally, for fire, we completed condition audit of fire buildings, which I'll go into more depth. Replaced the roof at Fire Station 7, and then completed the exterior scrim at the library, which was another hail project. On the revenue side, we are sitting at, what is that, 3.8 million? 3.59. Most of that is coming in the charges for facility management. So those charges that we pass through to our tenants, and those things cover operations and maintenance, utility costs and capital improvements. And then we've got a little less than $1 million for new City Hall construction. So revenues by department for administration is $214,000. Fire being the largest consumer of our services for administration. The reason why that's so large is we've added a second FTE for fire. So we were providing project management services, and now we're providing the hard repair and maintenance services. So we have a dedicated facility maintenance 2 staff that's going to be triaging and providing maintenance and repairs at the fire stations. We also increased costs to parking division for condition audit that we completed and subsequent repairs that we're going to be managing. And then additionally to library and parks for management of hail repair projects that were completed this year. BOC revenues by department, 1.2 million, with public works being the largest consumer and police being second. Adjustments were made on our charges to BOC tenants. due to a space analysis that we conducted. So we wanted to right-size the budget commensurate to the amount of type of space that each department and division occupies. And what we did was, previously we were just charging all of our tenants one lump sum, and we bifurcated those charges out now. So we're charging a base rent and OpEx charge. So that's the utilities, operations and maintenance, insurance charges. And then we have a dedicated capital fund charge that we are using those funds specifically for capital projects. So instead of just having one lump sum, we're actually being intentional with the funds that we're collecting, and then we use them for those specific projects. For existing City Hall, we are at $321,000. We're budgeting 6 months of charges to departments and divisions. That's with the assumption that we're only going to be occupying this space for 6 months, police being the largest tenant there, courts being second. For new City Hall revenues, we're at $478,000. Again, we're budgeting 6 months charges to those departments and divisions. And those charges were calculated based on the existing operating expense per square foot of this building, and then extrapolating that out to the amount of space that the departments are going to be occupying at new City Hall. Fundamentally, that building is going to be more expensive to operate just because it's larger. It's got larger systems, larger equipment in there. So after we have 6 months occupancy in that space, we'll have a better idea of what our actual OpEx charges are going to be. But as you can see there, we've got municipal court being one of our largest tenants. On the expenditure side, we're at 3.6 million. So our challenges, and we talk about this a lot of the time when it comes to not only facilities, but just asset management in general, is what happens when you move things to the fringe. And what I mean by that is what happens when you don't maintain your assets, when you don't do preventative maintenance, when you don't do the schedule replacement of equipment. We run into two big items. One is we're seeing a lot of aged infrastructure all failing at the same time. Systems and equipment have a useful life of 20 to 25 years. We're seeing the BOC at 23 years, and a lot of those systems and equipment weren't maintained well. So we're getting hit with a lot of age infrastructure that's going to have to be replaced at the same time. Some of the larger capital items that I've captured here that I'm thinking about over the next 3 to 5 years are needing a new roof at the animal shelter. That's about $145,000. For BOC, which is a pretty large campus, we're a little shy of 18 acres now and potentially expanding onto the other 20. Is windows at $300,000, all new rooftop units at $300,000. The big question mark is how are we going to fund the wash bays at $4 million? We've got asphalt at $2.8 million. On the fire side of things, running into the same issue, things haven't been maintained. Some of the bigger items there are concrete aprons and driveways, $200,000. We're seeing about a $400,000 cost in some station remodels. That's to bring up accessibility, and then also for having 2 genders in fire stations, so we have separate restrooms for them. And then new City Hall roof at about $800,000, and 3rd floor mechanical at $500,000. So on the repair and maintenance side, we're continuing to tackle that backlog of deferred maintenance and working on implementing a more robust preventative maintenance program. But as I think through things and trying to implement the staff that I have most efficiently, I think it's the right time to move past just thinking about things in a preventative maintenance perspective. So I want to be preventative, corrective, and proactive. So the staff that we have, the skills that they're good at, I think it's really time for us to think about implementing that at all our facilities. Slide, please. So our opportunities, not only is the facilities division growing, but the city is generally. So the question is, how do we do so thoughtfully? One item that I come back to that I presented last year was called Total Quality Management. We're working on implementing ISO 41001. For those of you who don't know what ISO is, it's an international standards body. What it is, it's a TQM tool to establish industry standards, right? So instead of us reinventing the wheel, we use standards that are created by industry professionals and we implement those and scale them appropriately. What it does is it's consistent, sustainable, and efficient implementation of facilities management. And then how it helps is there's effective controls over outputs. Like I said, we're not spinning our wheels creating things. We just implement what's already been done. And then additionally, Energy Star, it's a benchmarking tool to help us manage our facilities better. And what it does is it allows us to see the performance and health of the built environment in relation to similar size facility management departments across the nation. And then how it helps is it aligns with council's strategy for Energy and Conservation Commission initiatives. I discussed last year about jumping the S-curve. Maybe a better way of putting it is how do we get out from behind the 8 ball? And that is our hard service deliverability across our portfolio through our computerized maintenance management system. So fiscal year 23 versus fiscal year 24, we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see some bright spots, and I wanted to highlight those. So on the data that we collect and our tickets that are submitted and closed out, our average trade percentage is we're seeing about 23% for access control, doors, both man doors and overhead at 13%, plumbing at 11%, electrical lighting at 9%, and HVAC at 8%. So what's good about the data is it gives us a snapshot of where our resources are going and making sure that we're training and educating our staff appropriately so we can go out and continue to manage these items. On vendors, we saw a reduction in augmented vendor services by approximately $137,000 and a reduction in augmented vendor services by approximately 37.5%. If you recall last year, I requested 2 FTEs on the facility maintenance 2 support role. Those roles have been backfilled. One was November of 23 and one was January of 24. So not all of that $137,000 is a net revenue or savings to us. Some of that was reallocated to facility staff and personnel, but we are seeing a savings. And then on the facility staffing side, we're seeing a reduction in response time on our tickets by an average of 1.25 days. We're seeing a reduction in resolution time by approximately 2 days. And then we've increased our PM work by 6%. So what we're seeing there is we're responding to issues faster, we're resolving them faster, and we have better control over our mobilization and results. Our fiscal year 25 goals are 1, new city hall, complete construction and move tenants in, and then commission the equipment and manage the warranty phase. Disposal of real property, city hall being the primary one so we can offset construction costs for new city hall. And then total quality management, first is ISO, second is Energy Star, and then 3 is effectively scale hard services to fire. So like I previously mentioned, we were providing just project management services to fire. Now we're providing a full range of hard services to the fire department. And with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, John. Hope you're enjoying your new job. Appreciate your service. And council questions for John. Councilmember Gulick.
John, could you explain what the augmented vendor services is? Reduction in augmented vendor services.
Yeah, so we have our core services that we provide. So we're saying on the hard and soft service side, here is what we will provide to you. And some of those services are augmented by vendors. So we do snow removal in-house, but also we have a snow removal company that comes out and plows the lots.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then a couple of questions. One, I'm not sure you will be able to answer. Well, so we have currently the city rents facilities like the Miller Building and also at the depot for engineering. So we'll be reducing our rent outflows. That probably doesn't go through your department, I would guess, the rent. But we will be taking on, we have a bigger facility with the new city hall, and so they're having to add facilities staff to take care of that as well. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is correct.
Okay. Yeah, so I think as we're looking at budgets and as they increase, we have to keep that in mind as well, that we're not having to rent as much. But maybe this is a question for Kevin or Chris. What is our lease situation with the facilities that we are renting right now? And I know we're ramping up our plans for the move. What's our plans for getting out of the rental facilities?
So currently, I've kind of made a commitment to the county that we'll be out of the Miller Building by the 1st of September. So then we'll be out from underneath that lease. And then Public Works Department over at the depot has to be out, I believe, by the end of October is what we're planning on there.
Great, thank you. Then one last comment. Applaud the commitment to using the Energy Star portfolio manager. I was on a committee at School District 2. We implemented that some 10, 15 years ago, and they benchmarked all their projects, and it was really useful for, we thought we were doing a pretty decent job until we benchmarked things, and then we found, well, some actually were performing well, others weren't, and we're able to see how we're doing compared to our peers, and it was just really helpful. You can't manage what you don't measure, and so I think doing that with city facilities would be great, excellent. So I applaud that work. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Very good. Come this way, Councilmember Neese.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. John, I appreciate you taking on more responsibility. I mean, we talked about this, about too many silos and everyone's kind of doing their own thing. So how do you see that as working as far as starting to take over these? And do you see any other future departments that you can be looking at to kind of assist, not take over, but really provide a better service?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councilmember Neese. As we have a strategic plan of centralizing facilities management and the relationship that we've built with fire and the trust that we have is really kind of the impetus for us to get our foot in the door at other locations. I see it going very well. We manage facilities, that's what we do well. So when we're given the autonomy to come in and somebody trusts us and says, we need you to do what you need to do to make sure that the built environment, this ecosystem runs efficiently, that's where we do our best work. I see it going very well. I hear positive feedback from our tenants, and that's always a good thing. When you come in and they say, we appreciate what you guys are doing. Yes, we're keeping the lights on, right? But also we're making sure that we're maintaining a safe environment. We're providing the services that our tenants need so that they can go out and do what they're good at.
Do you see that expanding, though, to other departments?
Yeah, certainly. I'll pass it off to Mr. Iflin.
Okay.
So Councilmember Neese, yes. And I think you're seeing it, we've kind of shifted gears a little bit. And John has created kind of that strategic plan. And here's a menu of services, is how we're kind of looking at that. Because we don't want to put, everything's should be a cookie cutter for every department. Because there might be some departments that just need certain services. So that's how we're kind of tailoring it. But yes, it's a capacity issue at this point. But we do have a plan of how we're going to move forward. And as you can see, John's been managing projects for parking division. He's been managing for the library, things like that. So we're stepping in on a case-by-case basis right now in a lot of other departments to assist them, because John and his crews are better at managing some of those things than other departments are. And if they got time and capacity, then we're taking those on.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Owen, did you have anything for John?
No, nothing, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Joy? John, observation and then a question. When I was a kid, Whammo company made this ball, super compressed hard rubber called a Super Ball. And you throw it hard and it go way up and it come down and go way up, down. That's kind of what your budget looks like from year to year, because you're a conduit for these big building projects. It makes it impossible to track what your actual kind of internal operations costs are. So you might want to work with Andy. I don't know if there's a way to pull that out so you'd have two budgets, your regular year-to-year operation costs and then everything else, or the conduit. And then you can actually make better comparisons year to year, just from this layman's observation. And then I guess the question, it's a little disappointing, but not a big surprise, that on your list of projects or challenges is the new city hall with a roof, 800,000, boilers, 250,000, HVAC, 500,000 for third floor. We haven't even moved in it, and you're already giving us a list of bills. Not a surprise. We knew we were not doing everything when we went in, and we know the third floor, that's the county. We've been ignoring that. That's kind of their problem. When do we have to start worrying about the roof and the boilers?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, I like to get out ahead of things early, often and early. The roof we can probably get a minimum of 7 years out of, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm coming to you last minute saying, oh, we need to replace the roof. I want us to be putting money away, appropriating funds every year so that in 7 or 10 years, we have the funds and we're not doing a supplemental budget request.
Is that for both the roof and the boilers, 7, 10 years?
No, the boilers probably have another 5 years minimum. But
On top of that, or only 5 years?
I would say a minimum of 5 years. Yeah, they're in fairly good condition. So the new design of the heating and cooling system is drastically different. And the reason why we're retaining the steam boilers is because we have to retain the steam air handling units on the third floor. So assuming that we do some sort of leasehold improvement or tenant improvement for the county, if they decide to do another lease extension, or if we get someone else in there, will dictate what we do with the steam boilers. But our plan is to sunset them at some point.
Okay, thank you. Nothing imminent then?
No, not at all.
Still something that we need to have on the radar screen. So thank you very much. Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes, John, you have, as we look at you're moving from this facility over to the larger building, and looking at your support to, you have 5 people. Are you going to need more to be able to keep the place clean?
Potentially. I think it depends on how we appropriate our staff and what sort of cleaning model we deliver. I really want to get away from having individual trash cans in each office. That's time and money that we're losing. So if we can think critically about how best to increase those efficiencies, maybe not. Maybe we have one staff that does day porting for 4 hours and then 2 staff at night that do the deep clean. So there's challenges and opportunities around that. Once we get in there and we actually see what that workload is, we'll have a better idea.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Aspenleiter?
Yeah, and John, I don't know if this one's for you or for Kevin, but it's kind of a play off of Councilman Neese's question. One thing that kind of struck me last night was one of the positions that Rusty was requesting at the Met was a facilities position. And I know their facilities is a little bit different because they've got all the bus stop benches and things like that. But again, in this model of efficiency, we've got a department that if we gave them that FTE would have 3 facilities FTE, and we've got a facilities department. And there doesn't seem to be, on paper anyway, any cross-training, any crossover, any cross-support, and any optimization of those services and those FTEs. And I'm wondering why that is.
So Councilmember Aspenleiter, yes, that's a model that we're looking at trying to go to, but it takes some time to implement and strategically put that in place for that to happen. Part of moving over to the new city hall is going to automatically do that because we're not going to have the depot. We're not going to have the Miller building people. So, that's part of it that's going to happen. But that's type of the model that we're going to get to of what services, whether it's Met or the airport or the library, is it those custodial services or are those best just separated, buildings specific that might work the best? And it's more of the mechanical system, the bigger type systems that maybe facility takes on. But that's the type of model we're looking at, and how does that look and how are we building it?
Thank you, Councilmember Tidswell. Councilmember Boyette. Councilmember Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor. John, the Babcock, does that fall under your jurisdiction?
Sure, it does.
I don't see that even mentioned in your presentation. Talk to me about what the plan is there and how we're thinking about that.
Yeah, so conversations that we have is how are we going to fund any sort of improvements there, right? And we keep coming back to TIF, and there's a big question mark on TIF. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin. He's got.
more
Yeah.
insight on that.
Councilmember Rupsis, that's kind of where we're at. You know, we've got up to $2 million in infrastructure that we've kind of identified that needs to be done at the Babcock. Specifically, some of the more pertinent stuff, $200,000, $150,000, $200,000 for the sign marquee out front. With that, yes, there's no funding anywhere. We have to pull from somewhere else if we want to fund that, and we didn't feel it was pertinent at this time to do that. I think TIF is one of our options that we know we're going to have to seriously look at, but at this point, until we see the valuation come in August, that's kind of our plan. Let's see what the valuation comes in at. Is there something we can do to move forward? John's been out there looking at grants, things of that nature. It hasn't been real fruitful for the type of amounts that we're looking for, but we're looking for options. I know Councilmember Shaw is on the Babcock Theater Committee, so she's, you know, I know always throwing out ideas and things like that where possibly we could look for money.
Other piece I would add, just straight along those lines, is, you know, and I can't remember, Tom, if you were there or not, 2 downtown tax increment finance meetings ago, I brought to the table that I frankly, and then had this conversation with a few of them one-on-one, which is I see the TIF as the revenue source for this. Now, it's not the only. You can do anything in the general fund. The only 2 areas I would add to what Kevin's added inside of the TIF budget is it's my understanding that at their last meeting, and I wasn't able to be there, they were crystal clear, and it is going out in writing to at least 2 of the grant projects that we have given have been awarded several $100,000, north of $500,000, I believe, between the 2 projects, to give a firm deadline that if you don't complete your projects, you can no longer just assume we're going to make this reimbursement to you 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So that in combination with what we learn about taxable values downtown, I think are the 2 kind of fingers crossed. I hate to say that. I don't want to see those projects fail, but one of them is behind by years. So there is some light there, but again, that's not going to be a great long-term fix, but it may absolutely be a bridge to dealing with some of these urgent issues relative to the Babcock and coming from the downtown tax increment area versus the entire city.
Very good, thank you. Nothing else, maybe Councilmember Shaw? And you're
Yes, thank you. I had the exact same questions, no surprise about the Babcock. I sent out a couple emails to Kevin and John yesterday, and then another one to Andy last night. I'm disappointed that we don't have any funding for the Babcock in here. I think there are some really critical issues that cannot last more than a few months, as we saw in a presentation not very long ago. I know it's tough to balance these budgets. I know you guys have worked really hard and done a good job, but that is a disappointment for me, and so I'm scrambling around trying to figure out where we come up with at least $150,000 to fix that marquee, because it's not going to limp along any longer. One of the things I threw out, just to let council know, is that I emailed Andy to ask when we're going to have an answer on sort of the legality of levying the $200,000 as an additional millage if that government review passes. If we get a thumbs up from legal on that, I would like to propose a budget amendment to appropriate that money for the Babcock for this year. But John, I have a larger question for you, which is, I know I've posed this to you kind of in the past. I'm not sure if you have an exact answer for me tonight, but the city owns, the Babcock, the Moss Mansion, the Alberta Bear Depot, they all need investment going along. And much like I think the decision was made to make sure that the fire department had a dedicated, that council supported $300,000 a year going into this deferred maintenance, we don't have that for these properties. And I think it's why we're seeing these huge numbers now, because there hasn't been something in place, which is why we're so glad to have a facilities director now that's focused on this. And I know you can't solve all the problems at once, but I'm wondering if you've had any more thought about what an appropriate number might be to eventually try and figure out a way to start putting away money every year so that it's not an emergency situation like it is now.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Shaw. So that goes back to my point of what happens when you move things to the, right, is that project that's $300,000 this year is going to be 375 or 400 next year. So the sooner we can start appropriating funds and tackling some of this stuff, the less it's going to cost in the future. I think it'd be wise for us to go out and actually do a condition audit on some of these locations so we can get a good idea of what the magnitude is of the current conditions and really understand the repair methodology and the costs associated with those repairs.
I would certainly like to see that. I mean, if you can come to council or come to me, come to Babcock, whatever, I would like some number of what you think would be a good target, even if it's just an estimate for this year, just at least so council can begin having this conversation, because I think it's really important. I think you're doing a great job with a lot of the other facilities. I think these are particularly challenging ones because they're historic buildings. It comes with a lot of other, issues, but I think we at least need to have the conversation this year. So if you could put a number to that for me, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Denise?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, John, does your budget include the charges to the tenants coming into the new city hall for the $800,000 roof and the boilers that are going to have to be replaced in 5 to 7 years?
To a certain degree, yes.
Okay.
We're assuming that the charges that we're passing through our tenants are going to cover our base rent and operating expenses. And then additionally, we're going to have extra funds that we start putting towards those capital projects. How much that actually is, we don't know. The conversation that I had with Chris and Kevin and Andy is a lot of these departments are seeing an increased cost just because their footprint is expanding. So we wanted to be cognizant of that and be aware of how much we're charging. So we went on the lower end of the cost per square footage allocation to those departments. If that.
Okay. Yeah, it does, but I just want to make sure that we are putting the money away for those. And if this budget's doing that, that's great. I want to make sure we're doing that because I believe that we need to do that. We've done it with the ERPs. We need to do it with other capital projects like this as well. So.
Yeah, certainly, Councilmember Neese. So the idea is that once we're in there for 6 months and we have a general idea of what OpEx is and the fluctuation of utilities across the different seasons, we'll have a better idea to say operating costs are $500,000 and then we're going to charge an additional $300,000 for capital projects each year.
I thought we'd get those costs down to what Randy Hafer pays, which is 0, right? All right.
I might lean on Councilmember Gulick for some help there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for John? Councilor Chris?
Mayor, could I add back to kind of a response to Councilmember Shaw's question? I've had a conversation both with Dealer Park in our relationship with the Mustangs, as well as with Art House. And it actually came out of something that's happening with Sean Lynch in utilizing our parking lot for concerts this summer, which is, how would they respond if the city were to create some scenario that says there's a $2 surcharge to use a facility that we own, and would we adopt some resolution or ordinance that says that money goes into a fund to fund future capital needs at that facility? And frankly, and I'm assuming based on our other budget conversations, you guys would be generally advocates for and support that kind of an idea. But rather than springing this on them, I've asked them, hey, how would you respond to this? How would this affect you, do you think? But it's one area that I have been thinking some about as a way to candidly be able to show, hey, the users who are using these facilities are putting some money on the table. They already are, but frankly, a way also to leverage our public dollars, showing over years' time there. So I don't think it can be a real significant surcharge, but frankly, as we look at Dealer Park and some of the improvements that need to be made to it, that $90,000 we've been setting aside has been fantastic, but it needs to grow. And it really is the same issue that we have with these. So unless I hear, no, please don't pursue that, that's a conversation we're having at the administrative level to see what kind of response we would get there and whether that's a way to also help fund capital long-term. It's not going to bring in hundreds of thousands overnight, but again, over time, it adds up.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Chris, that's exactly what we did at Metro Park, and we put $1 or $2 on every ticket. We could do the same thing at the Babcock. You could do the same thing at Dealer Park. You'd bring in money to start replacing some of the things that need to be taken.
Anything else for John before we move on? Don't see anything else. Don't see any yellow hands. Chris, anything? Our business meeting is Monday. Anything in the way of, there's no public comment. Oh, on this item? Is there public comment on this item? Go ahead, Kevin, on budget item number 1.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. During the safety mill levy discussion, I thought I heard the comment that there would be a dedicated traffic division set up. And I don't know if that ever happened. Did we get a set group of officers that are going to do nothing but traffic? And I thought we had that sort of promise made to us.
And Kevin's going to comment on that. My understanding is yes.
Yes, there's 4 officers and 1 sergeant in the traffic unit.
You're just too good of a driver. You don't see them.
No, I see them every day because everybody in town is so damn frustrated with this racing that's going on and these constant high-speed crashes that we see on a daily basis in this town. And it's all because either the traffic division isn't doing much or the deterrent isn't high enough because nothing's slowing them down. I mean, you've got these guys that think that, their muffler is just something that they can be removed and let's see how much noise we can make and how fast we can make it from intersection to intersection. And that's evident by the fire department that shows up with the jaws of life pretty regular and cuts people out of the cars. I was just going through some laws. I thought this one was interesting. Fenders, splash guards, and aprons. You got these dirt bags and these diesel pickups that think they can set their wheels way outside the fenders, rip through the intersection, throw rocks on cars and break their windshields. And it says right here that, a person may not move or permit to move unless he's fixed it. But they drive around every damn day in town. You got these motorcycles that think 90 miles an hour is just the speed limit. So this perception that things are better, I don't think is right. There's a perception out there that it's a hell of a mess. Now, if they're having a problem running into these guys, I'll put them in the work truck and they can ride with me. Because I crisscross this town pretty regular every day and I see them every day. Maybe they're just not running into them, but by God, I see them quite often. I thought there was an interesting comment. It was in the Epic Times. It was Sheriff Grady Judge out of Florida. He says, you know what? We started picking up the toll jumpers. Our murder rates went down. Our burglars went down. And all of these property crimes started going down because we started picking up the toll jumpers. Because you got this small segment that are nothing but the criminals in this town that never, ever, ever seem to get stopped. It's just this constant small group that cause 90% of the problem. I don't know. I just don't think we're doing a good job. And I think that more could be done. And I would have liked to hear the chief's comments. Matter of fact, I'm going to make some records requests for some of these laws. We're going to find out just how many of these laws they're actually enforcing. We're going to find out how many muffler laws are they writing, how many car stereo noise violations are they making, how many of these mud flap laws are they writing. We're going to see what they're doing. Let's just do just exactly what the councilman here said. Let's measure it. Let's just see exactly what they're up to. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? If not, that concludes then item 1. Chris, anything in the way of upcoming agenda items?
Nope, covered them last night, so we're good.
Okay. Items of council discussion. Councilmember Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, questions for you. Just in general budget concepts or we have the public safety fund that every year has a funding balance, ending funding balance, seems to be about $2 million. Last year, it was budgeted to be 1.3 million, and it's estimated now to be 2.2 million at the end of FY24. We're estimating, we're budgeting for FY25 1.9 million. Seems to be, it tends to be a little bit more than that, probably from vacancy savings or something like that. How do we know that $2 million is the right number there? Is there, as people are talking about, wanting to, do more on public safety, is there some avenue to look at there? Also, I think sorry, I was looking at another fund. But in general, what do you target for those ending balances? How do you target that, and where do we get into a dangerous spot?
Sure.
When we're looking at potentially using that?
Yep. Thank you, Councilmember Rupsis. Our approach has been to keep fund balance in the public safety fund really right around 1.6 million. And the reason there really, I guess we're using all of the public safety mill levy entirely for public safety. So that's initially showing that we're not accumulating reserves with it. The fund balance really comes into the general fund, where a significant portion of that public safety funding comes from. So when you look at the general fund and public safety combined, that's really what we're looking at to say, okay, do we have enough cash to cash flow both the transfer to the public safety fund as well as those costs in the public safety fund? So when you look at the fund balance in general fund, it is 29% of that total expenditure, which includes that transfer over. So we're trying to capture 29% of that transfer as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, we don't generate much fund balance in the public safety fund, or if we do, we're generally using it that next year.
So there's not a lot there, but if we're talking about a couple head counts, is that something that gives you heartburn, or they say, well, we want to use a little more of that reserve, or draw that down just a little bit? Where do we get into the dangerous situation?
I mean, I think short term that's an option, because we're demonstrating we're accumulating funds through vacancy savings right now. That's really it. So short term, that's an option. As the chief said, or Chief St. John said, they have some vacancy savings. Police and fire don't spend 100% of their budget every year, so there is some kind of added in there each year. But so I think you could do that for a year, but eventually that's going to catch up, and you have to have the funding to fund those new positions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Do we have council discussion? I'll just mention two things. One, council, I did go to the meeting with the group pursuing a indoor tennis facility and pickleball facility, and I would encourage you, there's one more of their 4 meetings tomorrow, I think at 8. Very interesting. They're focused on property just outside the city limits. I think it has real potential if they can find private funding for it. The other question is, I was searching, I thought the results on the school safety levy would be available. They have announced the results on the elections, other elections, but I am not seeing anything on the results of the levy. You found it, Chris?
Just came up in my feed. The headline is voters reject 2 Billings school safety levies.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Public comment on anything not on our agenda? Then we will adjourn.